As AI floods LinkedIn with more content than ever, originality has become the real scarce resource. Our next guest spends a lot of time thinking and writing about that. Ashley Faus from Atlassian is widely known for her work on thought leadership, content strategy, and the difference between just publishing and actually thinking in public. In this session, we explore how real authority is built through clarity, curiosity, and depth. We talk about why you can't outsource the thinking and how AI can broaden your perspective without stealing your voice. Ashley, great to have you with us. I want to start with something you wrote about recently on LinkedIn: taste. You said taste is becoming one of the key creative skills in the age of AI, and that we're in a pattern recognition phase before we learn to break the rules. So, what does taste actually mean for marketeers today? And what does good taste look like?
I love this question because I'm seeing everybody. I feel like a year ago, the mantra was like, I'm not afraid of AI replacing me. I'm afraid of someone using AI replacing me. And now the mantra is in an age where, creation is cheap, the defining human factor is taste, right? And so it's like we've suddenly discovered this thing that no one's ever thought about. And it's interesting because from my perspective, we have solved taste over and over and over throughout human history. We have managed to define it with rules in a variety of other industries in places that are hard to define it, like music, like art, like food, right? And it's funny because if someone is capable of creating something that the market rewards over and over and over again in music, in art, in food, whatever it is, then objectively they have found some sort of pattern that works. And even if
Mm,
that pattern is actually breaking the traditional rules, it means that there are rules that we all generally agree on. And there is kind of a right way to break them. And that's counterintuitive, but
mm,
you see it. So it's super interesting in writing, for example, and this I think applies to a lot of marketers and the conversation with AI today. Anne Hanley actually just wrote a beautiful LinkedIn post. And again, if you read her writing, it's so good. Her writing is just excellent.
yeah,
And
yeah,
she was
I'd
basically
agree.
saying she was defending the M dash, and she's like, M dashes are getting such a bad rap
No,
because
I read
everyone
that
thinks
post.
they're
Yeah,
indicative of AI. Yeah, and it's like she uses obviously the M dash very well because she's an expert writer, but she also uses sentence fragments, which are not grammatically correct, right?
mm,
A sentence fragment is missing either the noun or the subject or the verb or something, right? Like if you go back to the grammar rules. And yet, most excellent writers use run on sentences and fragments.
mm.
And yet, the writing is beautiful and clear and concise, right? So I don't think we have actually discovered the rules that already exist from a marketing perspective. The current trend is authenticity, right? And it's like, well, what does it mean to be authentic? And like, let's put this out there. And you can, it's more of a feeling, it's more of an energy or a vibe, and like not in a woo woo kind of way. Like you can tell when someone is engaged and listening and those kinds of things. We can fake it. This is another interesting thing I've talked about where I don't have children, but I have nieces and nephews, and I watch my siblings teach their children empathy, kindness, being
Mm,
polite, um, caring for other kids, right? You have to share. And we know that offering your toy is indicative of being kind to other people. So if these are skills that we can teach with language, we teach them please, we teach them thank you, right? Then that means that we could also teach AI to kind of be empathetic or be authentic,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
I don't think we've discovered the hard rules quite yet of what taste in marketing means in the age of AI, but I think we have patterns of this from other industries and from other ways of interacting that we will start to see kind of the rules and then the breaking of the rules in expert ways emerge probably in the next couple of years. I don't think I think we're still going to have the whole conversation of like, what is taste? What are the rules? How can you break the rules? Right? I think that conversation is the conversation for the next like 12 months, and then beyond that is when we actually start to see uh, you know, the true taste emerge and being codified. The AI basically looked across all of the human created content. A number of really excellent writers used the M dash. And so AI was like, haha, the M dash is how the good writers do it. I shall use the M dash. And then a bunch of people who are not actually good writers and don't understand the purpose of the M dash were like, haha, AI wrote it and it just sounds robotic. And so because the rules were broken in the wrong way, now all of a sudden everyone hates M dashes and all of the good writers who were like, whoa, 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 and
Yeah, yeah,
stole
yeah.
the M dash from me. Like, AI did not invent the M dash. I was a good writer before this nonsense, and now you've ruined it for me, robots.
This sense of exploring and curiosity connects to something you've talked a lot about, seeing marketing not as a funnel, but as a playground. In your work on human centered marketing, you describe the audience journey as a playground rather than a linear path. I mean, what do you mean by a playground? And how does that mindset change how we think about creativity, especially now that AI sits inside the process?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. I think from a sales and marketing perspective, we're finally starting to see the conversation shift where it's like the buyer is in control and, you know, particularly in the age of AI, it's like everyone's searching via LLMs. So how do we show up in an LLM?
Mm.
And it's like in a lot of the same ways that you should have been showing up before AI came on. Um, People have never wanted to be hunted and captured and locked down in a deal. We use this adversarial language to talk about the people. It's like these are humans behind the screen. Like I'm a human, you're a human, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's the first thing is this idea that we're going to go in this linear fashion and we're going to force people down this linear funnel. That has never been the case. We just haven't had a good model to replace it. And so that's why I
Mm.
propose the playground and treating the audience journey as a playground. From my perspective, even starting the fact like a customer journey map. And I'm like, that, okay, that's fine. If we want to actually constrain it to customers, that means we are looking at a subset of the audience that went on this journey and actually became, you know, a closed
Yeah.
one booked customer. If you want to call it a customer journey map, then you have to be clear we are talking about customers. And then inevitably, the first step of that customer journey map starts with prospect lands on our website.
No.
Okay, on one hand, now that we've constrained this to customers for our journey map, fine. I'll allow you to call them prospects. They did not start on our website. They came from somewhere. I mean, did they come
Mm,
from Google? Did they come from social? Did they come from an LLM? Did they come from a conversation where, oh, I was talking with my friend Andrew about Atlassian. And so now I've gone to Atlassian.com, right? Like
mm,
I came from somewhere, even if that somewhere is difficult for the brand to track. So as we think about this from a playground perspective, if again, I've got nieces and nephews, right? They don't go slides, then swing, then merry-go-round every single time. Sometimes they skip the merry-go-round. What about, you know, their parents who are sitting on the park bench watching them play? Are they using the playground the wrong way? Of course not. And inevitably, right, my nephew wants to go up the slide instead of down the slide. And so as we think
absolutely.
about this from an audience perspective, the idea that the only way you can go through the journey is slides and then swing and then down, you know, like, or whatever, I guess slides were at the beginning. So you have to go down the slide and then you have to walk to the merry-go-round and then you go one time around and then you're going to sit quietly on the park bench for 10 minutes, right? Like that's absurd.
Can you
Sometimes the kids
imagine?
just want
Yeah.
to sit on the park bench the whole time, right? Our audience is the same way. And so we have to create these paths that allow them to go up, down, and sideways and use content the wrong way. So one of the things I talk about is pricing. Pricing is traditionally considered a bottom of funnel or conversion level or
Mm,
purchase level conversation. But if you're trying to secure budget to even have that conversation, right? Like somehow you're not even in the funnel at all. And from a
mm,
brand perspective, you wouldn't be in the awareness phase if you're asking for prices. Like clearly you're
no.
aware, but if you don't have budget, you literally can't get into a consideration or purchase discussion. But if you're asking about budget, then you're aware? Like, wait, you know? And so again, like that's that example, it's the funnel starts to break very quickly. And then same thing, obviously, from an LLM perspective. having people query and say, what's the best project management software that includes these 5 criteria is very different than Atlassian versus a competitor, which is how they might Google in the past. That's not how people are searching. They're searching more robust. Um, and so by the time the LLM gives them that information, they may have gotten all of the information they need before they ever click on a website or click to speak to a salesperson. They've made that decision, and it's very hard for us to track or see because that lives in the LLM. It effectively lives in a third party. It doesn't live on our website, so we can't track,
Or the Google
which class
summaries as
they
well.
win.
Those things, as well. Okay, so as we shift from funnels to playgrounds, it naturally ties into how we share ideas, which brings us to thought leadership. I mean, you've said previously you can't outsource the thinking. In your view, what separates real thought leadership from smart content, especially now that AI can churn out so much of the latter?
So thought leadership thought leadership is a subset of smart content. So if we go back to those intents, right? Um, helping the user or the audience or the customer, again, depending on what you're doing, solve a problem, you need to do that in a smart way. But frequently, that is existing problems with existing or maybe small incremental solutions, right? If I can explain something to you in a simple, concise way that allows you to immediately fix your problem, I have delivered smart content to you. I have not delivered thought leadership to you, right? So
Okay.
the key differentiator is that thought leadership helps the audience think and act in a new way, in a different direction. And so if you've never considered the problem of people, we'll take this AI thing, right? Um, the when this shift kind of started to happen, Amanda Natividad actually coined this term zero-click content, and this was prior to AI, but this was the idea. She actually framed it more in terms of like social media, right? A lot of those platforms either penalize clicks off platform
Mm, like LinkedIn.
or
Yeah.
don't, they don't even allow it, right? Like Instagram, you still can't put a link in a post. You have to do
Mm,
link in bio, right? Um, LinkedIn, it's a whole thing. Who knows what the algorithm is doing? But I think we all agree that in general, LinkedIn penalizes putting links in posts, right? And
mm.
it's not just from an algorithm perspective. Humans don't like it either, right? How often are you reading? You're like, oh my gosh, this is super interesting. And it's like, click here to watch my webinar, right? Or click here to read the full article. And you're like, no, why? Right. So it's not, the platforms are greedy and humans are lazy.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to stay right where they already are. And so Amanda, and again, this is like her thought leadership, right? She coined this term. It was a new idea of zero-click content. And so optimizing for platform native content obviously fundamentally shifts how you create and how you measure. Now, in the age of AI, this concept of zero-click searches,
Mm,
zero-click information is even more relevant. And so, how you address that problem, the idea that you have zero-click content, like that is kind of the new insight. How you address it, if you say, okay, you need to be present on these other platforms, you need to be elevating the people and building trust with the people, because that's how the LLMs look for kind of trustworthy content.
mhm,
Many of the same fundamentals from an SEO perspective still
mm,
apply from an LLM perspective. Um, the core of kind of white hat SEO or modern SEO is that it's not just good for the machines, it's also good for the humans. I'd say like black hat or old school SEO with like optimized just for the machines. And it's like, well, in theory, the machines are in service of the humans. So if it's good for the machine, it's probably good for the human to have clear page hierarchy, for example, to have clear keywords so that the topic is clear, right? Um, so that's the difference between smart content and thought leadership is smart content helps the audience solve a problem today using
mhm.
existing solutions. Thought leadership helps them think and act in a new direction. And in some cases, because it's a new idea, it gives them language to then go search for potential solutions to this problem.
But you also said that being contrarian isn't enough. It has to help people act differently. But how do you test if an idea actually does that? If someone's trying to build their thought leadership skills, how do they know when an idea genuinely shifts thinking?
So there's a couple ways to do this. I think the first, that's like a little exercise that I tell people to run through. Um, take something in your industry or in your problem space that really irks you. right? Like, what's something where you're constantly just kind of ranting against it? And then the next step is, what is the slightly unhinged thing you would do to solve that problem, right? And right there, you're probably starting to get into the contrarian space where you're kind of like, I would just do the opposite. And you're like, okay, cool. You've got now your spiky point of view is a way to put this, or you've got potentially your new thought of like,
Mm,
here's a thing I think should change. Here's the crazy thing I would do to change it. Okay. Walk that back a couple steps. What's realistic to actually make this change? And how did you get to the point where you realize this thing is not working? You actually have started to take some steps to try to change it. You've shared some of those steps with other people. You're actually getting results from it. That's how you start to get to this thought leadership piece. So, for example, how I ended up at the playground. Um, One thing that bugs me to no end is gated content. Like, I just
mm,
fundamentally don't like it. I think I did it earlier in my career. I think it produces a false sense of security and a false sense of optimism about how many people are actually interested. It leads to bad marketing because you're basically like, I'm going to nurture you. No, you're not. I'm going to chase you down and harass you until you either block me or buy from me. Like, right? Neither of those are good. And so I fundamentally, I was just like, I hate gated content, right? All right, what's the unhinged thing I would do? Naturally, it's I would just ungate all content. I would never
mm,
gate any content ever. You want the information? It's here. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to give me an email address. You don't have to DM me. You don't have to comment. Nothing. You just get it for free, right? I work in a large enterprise company. I am under
mm.
no illusions that I will ever be able to convince my entire company to ungate all content forever, right? It's not going to happen. Okay. But what does it look like if I walk it a few steps back? And how did I get to that idea of kind of I hate gated content? What's the core issue? And for me, the core issue is friction. And so, where does that
Okay.
friction come from? Well, it comes from forcing people down a linear funnel. Okay, well, if it's not a linear funnel, then what is the buying process like? Right. And so that then gets me to start thinking, if I'm going to say we should ungate all content, then that means that I fundamentally think that the way we put information out there in a buying process is wrong. That stems from the linear funnel model, or in SaaS, the looping decision journey, right? So if
Mm,
I don't think either of those models are the right way because fundamentally they introduce friction, what do I think is the right way? And that then sends me down the path of being like, oh, maybe it's this. Well, it doesn't work because of these caveats. Okay, it's this thing over here. Well, actually, that that actually kind of works. All right, let's go down that path. And then I tell it to someone, and is their gut reaction, "Ooh, no, I don't like it," or "It doesn't make sense," or like, "But what about these 10 caveats?" Right? If I don't have answers for those caveats, or I can't find answers for those caveats, maybe my idea is not useful or not helpful or
mm.
whatever. But if I say it and you're like, "Ooh, I like that. What about this other thing?" All right,
Yeah,
now
yeah.
we've got something where we've got momentum, right? And so you have to be willing to share the ideas. Like I had something, I came up with this little like 2 by 2 matrix, and I was like, I put it on LinkedIn. I was like, I think I have a solution, but I don't actually know what the problem is. What do you guys think this solves? And the comments were all over the place. There were several people who were like, I don't think it solves anything. And like the axes are interesting. I don't really know how they're related. And like, sorry, when you mean this in the right quadrant, what are you talking? And I was like, okay, nope, haven't found a solution. Like, I'm sketching things out and I think I've stumbled on something and I have not, right? And so you have to be willing to put your ideas out there and get that feedback. This codifying the ideas and then giving it to other people to test and make sure that it actually works in their context or based on their understanding. That's when you know, okay, I've got something that is at minimum helpful. And then when you start hearing people say, I've never heard this before, or like, where do I learn more about this? Or did you did you invent this? Or like, where did you get this? Right? Then you know you've got a novel idea.
The curiosity piece keeps coming back, and so does transparency. You said the words "learn more" are toxic for trust, and that transparency is marketing's most human trait. So, how does transparency shape originality and audience trust in the age of AI? And how is that playing out now?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. I think as we discussed this myth that educational content is the best content, and so we twist ourselves into pretzels to try to make everything learn intent content. That extends to our CTAs. We're going to put learn more, and then haha, it's actually a contact sales, form. If you want to, you're on a pricing page, you want to learn more about pricing, you have to contact sales, and I'm just like, I haven't learned anything, like give me the information. So um, learn more. If you're going to use that, it needs to truly link or expose learn intent content that does not require the audience to give you something in exchange to get access to this. And it needs to actually teach them something, right? It can't go to a sales form, it can't go to a gated form to fill out a white paper or whatever it is. So use explicit CTAs, watch the video, contact sales, download the asset, sign up for the webinar, sign up for our newsletter. All of that, see pricing, and then it actually takes you to a pricing page where you at least have, fair enough. Once you get into enterprise levels, particularly in the B2B space, you might have negotiating room, and you might need to get a custom quote.
Mm.
But like, tell me, am I looking at 4 figures, 5 figures, 6 figures? Like, what deal level am I dealing with here before I, give me
Yeah.
some information. So that's the first thing, is using explicit CTAs maintains that trust over time. And it's good for the audience and it's good for the company, right? Because if that means if I give you the option not to buy, and you choose to take a buying action, you meant to do that. I didn't trick you into buying any. I cannot trick you into buying anything. And if I force you down a buying path when you're not ready to buy, that's on me. When sales is angry that the leads are not actually leads, and it's because marketing forced somebody down a buying path when they
Mm.
just needed to get some basic information, that's my fault. That's not the audience's fault, right? So that every moment builds that trust. And we talk about this from a brand perspective, that the brand is the overall experience and perception in the mind of the customer or the audience or the market. And that is built with every single interaction. And so, even in small ways, those CTA buttons lying, because that's what's happening, lying to the audience breaks their trust. And so now they want to stay as far away from the brand as they can, because they know as soon as they take any action that signals that they might be considering looking at a
Mm.
tool, suddenly we're going to come in hard, right? So I think that's the first thing, is being very transparent to say, like, you know, here's what's going to actually happen when you click this button. And then I think that extends all the way through the audience experience. If I convince you or I show you that I will be explicit with my communication and I will answer your questions up front, it's likely that I've taken that same mindset into, let's say, the onboarding experience for a product. So I don't know how many times you've logged into a product and it's confusing and you're just like,
Mm.
okay, the buying process was actually super simple. I'm very confused that now I've landed in this product and I have no idea what to do. There's no onboarding, there's no documentation, there's nothing, right? So that then extends into the onboarding process of making it intuitive so that they're not constantly having to go back into that helper remediation intent because they can't use it in the first place, right? And so the integrity of of removing friction and making it easy for people to find value, get value, and grow value, all of that extends throughout the entire buying, using, maintaining process. And again, you can say all day long, like, our software is easy to use. Well, if it's not easy to buy, I don't believe you that it's easy to use. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And so
Yeah.
I think,
Very good
again, that
point. Yeah.
just, your words have to match the actual experience.
So much of this goes back to what you said earlier. Most systems have been built for tracking, not humans, which brings me to the human element. If AI can write and optimize, what still makes a human worth following? Or to borrow your line, what does it mean when you say humans are the antidote to AI insanity?
So, first off, I think this is kind of a two-part question, because the AI is not just independently doing things by itself. A human has asked it to help solve a problem, whether that's articulating an idea, whether that's understanding data, whether that's optimizing, by spitting out recommendations, right? Ultimately, a human is using a tool. AI is not just off magically producing things by itself. Like it's not independent. And I think that's another thing
Mm,
where people personify AI in a way that makes it
mm,
independent from humans, and it is not. It is a tool. It does not behave independently. It does not think independently. It does not find problems and solve problems independently. A human gives it a problem space or asks it for a solution or prompts it or whatever. So that's the first thing. The second thing, it cannot form relationships. So I remember actually in the early days of AI, right? LinkedIn implemented this feature. I assume it still has it, but maybe all of us ranted about it enough that they finally took it away. But literally, you would go to message someone on LinkedIn and it would auto generate, and it said it's like auto generating
mm,
a message of
mm.
like, "Hey, Andrew, it's been a long time. How are you?" That's freaking weird. Like, first of all, I would never say that. Second of all, the first time this happened to me, I was actually messaging somebody who I know from Twitter. I know we're supposed to call it X. No one knows what that is. We're calling it Twitter for clarity.
Yeah.
So I had been messaging with this person and we knew each other from Twitter. And so obviously, LinkedIn does not have the context and access to all of my Twitter messages. And so if I had come in and said, "Hey, Andrew, long time," you'd be like,
Whoa.
"Weren't we just talking last week on Twitter? Like, didn't
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just see you at a conference?" Right? And on one hand, the response to that is, "Well, that's not fair. AI can't know." And I'm like, there it is. There it is. It cannot have the context of the relationship that humans have. You and I have now spent time together face to face. You see how I behave on video. You see my energy. If I suddenly showed up, or if I suddenly on this call started speaking to you like this, and so if I was then telling you this or that, you'd be like, "Did something happen? Like, did you just get a notification that your dog died? Like, what suddenly happened that you're not looking me in the eye, you're not gesticulating, your voice is not modulating, like something is fundamentally wrong, right?" And I've had this experience. I actually had an in-person experience. I was doing an interview with somebody at Inbound, came off a call, showed up to this interview, and immediately they were like, "Are you okay? You seem a little off," and like they immediately knew that I was not my usual self because
Right.
they
Yeah.
know me. And
Mm,
so that ability to make the connection, that ability to have the full context, that ability to build the relationship, that is something that you cannot do with AI. And again, it is a tool, right? Like we've got to remember that this is a tool that is
mm,
meant to help us solve problems. It is not an independent force that is meant to push us out of our jobs. And so that ability to solve interesting problems and have that relationship with humans, that's why it still makes it worth it to follow a human. Find the people who their perspective helps you improve. Their energy helps you think more positively or fires you up to go solve a problem or makes you feel happy. Again, I know there's some people who their whole kind of vibe is like edgy or contrarian or like skeptical. I personally don't like to steep myself in that, right? And so
mm,
I go
mm,
find the people that are like, "Nah, we can do it," or "Yeah, let's work hard to figure it out," right? And so finding the people, in terms of the voice and tone that are what you want to continue
mm.
to grow in yourself, that's something that only humans can do. Because again, if I get in a negative spiral, like the LLM is going to match my voice, right? And so if I'm just like spiraling, then the LLM is going to be like, "Yeah, that sucks. You're right. Everything is bad." And now I'm just like in this terrible thought spiral, right? Versus I get on with you and you're smiling and you're asking questions and you're engaging with me as I talk. This is a very energizing conversation and gets us both into a better problem
Mm,
solving path and
absolutely.
creative headspace, right?
Okay, before we wrap up, one practical question for everyone watching. If someone wants to sound a bit more original today, going back to this idea of originality, what's one small thing they could do differently in how they think, write, or share?
This kind of dovetails both in how they think and how they write, and that's including stories. It's lived experience. So, from a super tactical way, I mentioned this before of saying in my experience or from my perspective, or I recently did or attended or engaged or read. I did this thing or I experienced this thing does two things. One, it grounds it in your actual experience, which is unique and not something the AI or any other human can replicate. And then two, it diffuses the skepticism because it's like, yeah, it's your lived experience. Like, of course you have this thought, right? So that's the first thing is really thinking about your own lived experiences or your own thoughts about something. And then the second thing is being willing to actually share that from a personal perspective. So when I
Mm.
released my book, I could have just said, today is book launch day, right? Like my book is now available for purchase. Please buy it. And that's fine. People would have done that. Instead, what I did is I opened with, I was published for the first time when I was in second grade. I had written this article and it got published in this monthly magazine. And I actually misspelled the word season two different ways because I was in second grade, right? Fast forward, 30 years, and I'm very proud to say that, I'm published again, this time for real. And I'm pretty sure I've caught all the typos, but if you catch any, let me know, right? And then basically saying, I actually am like friends with my second grade teacher on Facebook, and I can't wait for her to see a copy of my official book, right? That grabs you much more than me just telling you that I wrote a book. It tells you that I've been honing my craft and I had some stumbles along the way and what a funny heartwarming story and wow, like I too when I published my book wish that my, English teacher who was hard on me and graded my papers harshly could see me now, right? It gives that emotional thing. And so that's the piece of it where like that's a funny story.
Ashley, thank you so much. That was a really energizing conversation. Your distinction between smart content and true thought leadership, and your point that taste and curiosity are skills that we can keep developing even in an AI world. They give everyone here something concrete to work with. So I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.